I'm a crisis line volunteer with over 1000 logged calls. Ask me anything. 2 questions. Number 1. How long is a typical call? Number 2. Do you ever have repeat callers and/or are you ever curious about what happens to someone after they hang up? Number 1. On average calls last roughly 20 minutes. Obviously some are quite a bit shorter and others are much longer. Number 2. We have a number of repeat callers. Some are obvious because they tell the exact same story every time. Others you can piece together based on how they've progressed. Many callers will ask for your name and say something along the lines of, I think we've talked before. My name is. Remember? I'm the one who. And if you remember them, you can say so. And if you don't, you can let them know it was probably someone else, but you'd be happy to talk to them now anyway. Other callers will let you know they call often and some we have to invite to call back in a few hours if they are calling us multiple times in a short period. Obviously we want to be there to support the community, but we don't want them to become so reliant on us that they can't function day to day without us. Regardless, if we do recognize a caller, we aren't supposed to say anything unless they bring it up first, since calls are meant to be anonymous. But there definitely are some I never hear from again that I do often wonder about. Edit. I just remembered that there was a regular caller who I had talked to quite a few times who I suddenly stopped hearing from. It's not that unusual. Sometimes callers take a break. Some callers only call at a specific day/time. Some just decide they don't want to talk to a woman. I'd say it's probably been a couple months since I'd last heard from this caller, but we recently found out he had a heart attack and passed away. I'm not sure if knowing or wondering is better, but in this case it was sad either way. Thank you for being there for so many. I was wondering if you could share your most heartwarming/inspiring call. I had a call not too long ago from a mom who had a young son with autism. She was talking about how much she loves him, but that she was just feeling exhausted and worn down. She was crying on and off throughout our call, discussing how she's in the middle of a messy divorce case and adjusting to taking care of her son full time. It was apparent to me that she loved her son more than anything else in the world, but just needed to vent a little. At one point her son had come into the room and she immediately stopped crying and was fully present for him and his needs in that moment. It warmed my heart so much to hear and see what this mom was doing for her son, who likely won't appreciate or understand it until he is much older. She went on to discuss how hard she's been working to make sure he has a relationship with his father and that she still takes him to all his various appointments. We talked a lot about his safety and also discussed strategies for how she could simultaneously take care of herself so that she doesn't get this far into a breakdown again. She was so genuine and kind and truly just needed someone to hear her out. And at the end of the call she was honestly appreciative of me doing so. That's so touching. Thank you for the response. Of course. Hi. I often think about calling a line like this if I wake up in the middle of the night with a panic attack. I have a number of CBT and prescribed medicinal methods of calming myself down, but sometimes talking to someone new is the only thing that works. A couple of quick questions. Do you get calls like this often? How do you deal with an individual who you can't get to calm down, especially with how debilitating some of the psychosomatic symptoms of panic can be? Is your line open 24/7? And if not, can you recommend an appropriate crisis line? Edit. Forgot a word. Thanks for all you do, smiley face. Hey. Our line is 24/7 thankfully, and there are a number of other local lines that are too. We get calls from those in the middle of a panic attack often, so I would encourage you to call if you feel like it would help you. For me, I haven't encountered a caller yet who wasn't able to calm down while on the phone with me. Not saying that I can help everyone, I just haven't had an instance of this yet. I had a caller recently who said she was having a panic attack for the first time, and it took quite a while for her to calm down. But I was able to stay on the line with her for the duration of her panic and talked to her for a few minutes afterwards as well. I think the main thing to remember in a panic attack is that you know it will pass because you've dealt with them before. I know firsthand that they can feel like the world is collapsing in, but trying to keep that in mind helps a little. Each caller is different, so even though we have tools in our mind for what might help, we always ask the caller what has worked for them in the past first. It sounds like you've done a great job at building up your resource tool belt and are able to manage your symptoms on your own most of the time. The crisis line is another tool you can turn to if you ever need it, and as I said before, I'd encourage you to do so in the future. Is a night like New Year's Day usually hard to get through? I called a local line 1.5 hours ago and haven't gotten a call back yet. I'm not as bad now, but still too panicky to sleep. It all depends on the particular day, how many volunteers are working, and how many callers are trying to get through. Unfortunately, it's all unpredictable and can't be controlled or foreseen. I would suggest trying to find other local lines in your area. I know for me, we have at least 4 lines available for anyone, and a couple more that are region specific that would probably take your call anyway. How do you prevent yourself from becoming desensitized over time, especially when working out repetitive issues with callers? That's a super interesting question. I'll be honest and say I haven't really thought about it before. The approach I take is, every caller is a new person who feels their problem completely and fully. If I find myself feeling like I'm not 100% present, I try to imagine it's someone I love and care about telling me these things. When it comes down to it, each person has the right to feel what they feel. They are calling into the crisis line and are choosing to talk to me about whatever is going on for them. I hold this responsibility in the highest regard and feel truly privileged that there are those who feel comfortable sharing their lives with me. I think if I ever realized that I was feeling desensitized or burnt out for longer than a few shifts, I would need to seriously consider quitting or taking an extended leave. The last thing I want is to rob someone of having a call with someone who can fully meet their needs when they're in a vulnerable place simply because I can't get past my own ego. Has there ever been a phone call where you thought, I just fucked this one up? I know it might be a difficult question, but your response really matters to me. I was hanging around r/mental illness, responding to the suicide posts, and I just couldn't do it after a while. Talking to someone you know you can't talk down and is imminent danger became unimaginably painful. You just don't hear from them again. Second, I've called a few hotlines myself, and they've started taking detailed information. What's your policy on wellness checks? When do you drop the hammer and call the police? I've definitely had calls where I finished and thought I should have handled that differently. I especially felt that way in the beginning when I was still learning, but it still happens once in a while these days. Luckily, people are calling into the crisis line because they want help, even if they say they don't. So there haven't been that many instances where I wasn't able to help someone remain safe in that moment. I have had to call the police a few times, and it's definitely hard not hearing from those callers again. I've been fortunate in that the few times I have called, almost all of the callers stayed on the line with me until help arrived. There was one who didn't, and one who hung up before I was able to send help. Those were especially difficult. We only call the police when we feel someone is in imminent danger to themselves or others. And even at that, we still don't call until we talk to a staff person. The hope is that the person who is in danger trusts us enough to give us that detailed information, and that they'll remain on the line with us. As stated above, things don't always go that way, but I've been lucky to say they normally have. Hi. What nature are the majority of calls you take? Thanks for your work. Hey. Of course they all vary, but I'd say the underlying theme to 90% of the calls are loneliness and social isolation. Regardless of what the main issue is the caller wants to talk about, they are usually calling us because they feel they can't talk about that issue with anyone else in their life. So even if they have an abundance of friends and family, they don't feel close enough to disclose those particular thoughts or feelings. Thank you for the work you do. What is one hobby that helps you unwind from your day or week? I really love reading. It helps me escape from my own reality for a while and get lost in something entirely new. I also find exercising, journaling, and talking with my friends/family to be super beneficial to managing my more stressful moments. How do you keep a positive life view after constantly hearing people's tragic goings on? The hardest days for me are when most of the calls don't end up resolved by the time we disconnect, or most of the callers seem angry or upset with how I've handled the call. The main thing is remembering that how the caller responds to me has to do with them and what they are going through in that moment. I, as one human being, can only do so much, and although I believe I'm helping the majority of those who call in, they are ultimately responsible for their own life. And in turn, I'm too. I've had callers yell, scream, and call me names only for them to hang up and call back relieved that they are now talking to a more competent volunteer, when in fact, it's still me. They just don't realize it. Those calls remind me that I have control over how I view an interaction or situation, and can often change my view of the world based on how I choose to approach it. Wow, you made it to the end? Mom would be proud. Thanks for watching. You can show your support by liking and subscribing to my channel. Turn on the notification bell to be notified whenever a new video pops up. Have a nice day.